So what was your feeling then? How long was it before you came to some conclusion about how that could have happened?
Well, the building's frothing up into dust.
Yes.
And there's little debris left. But we're not familiar with, maybe that's a trick. And I just started collecting data as though I was on the site.
Yeah.
If I didn't understand what I was seeing, okay, go look at other data. But if all the data is consistent, all the images are consistent with the other piece of evidence, there's a whole lot of it's not just images that I looked at. There's
you looked at over 40,000 images, I believe. Is that,
right.
Yeah.
But also the seismic signals.
Yes.
And
perhaps we could just mention that a bit, because the seismic signals were picked up in Alaska, and was there somewhere else?
That's the magnetic field.
Okay,
but it's the inverse for the seismic signals. The Palisades seismic recording station,
right,
which is fairly close, about 20 miles away.
Yes.
Earlier that year, there was an earthquake in Midtown Manhattan. That was picked up just fine.
Yeah.
Same bedrock that the towers sit on.
Yeah.
The signal from the tower's demise did not travel through the earth. There is an S wave and a P wave, the primary wave and the secondary wave, and the space between the arrival times tells you how far away the epicenter is.
Yes.
Because they travel at different speeds through the earth.
Sure.
When the towers went away, there was no S wave or P wave. It did not travel through the earth. It was only a surface wave. And you get that when you lift the buildings off the ground. You no longer have that weight there. It's gone. Like when you get up off your mattress in the morning, the mattress recovers.
Yes, yeah.
That's like a surface wave. But like pulling a rubber band and snapping it, that pulse, primary wave is that type of signal. Or a jump rope, that kind of wave is the secondary wave.
Yes.
And they travel at different speeds through the earth. But there was
nothing recorded at all
for either of the towers or Building 7.
Yes. And Building 7, NIST didn't even mention in the report, I understand.
They had a second report for that.
Oh, right, okay, but not the major
They
one.
took it out of the first report and put it in a separate report.
Okie doke, all right. So going to the Alaskan, the magnet...
the Earth's magnetic...
Yes. That showed certainly something...
Something strange.
...occurred.
Some might argue pure coincidence, but there are 5 main events that happened that day. The North Tower got a hole in it, South Tower got a hole in it, South Tower went away, North Tower went away, then Building 7 went away. Each of those 5 events, there was an abrupt change in the Earth's magnetic field, as recorded at 6 different magnetic recording stations. It could be coincidence, but it's mighty strange.
Yeah, it is mighty strange. And also there has been no explanation of that, is there? Or
no.
I haven't heard any.
No.
Have you an explanation of what could have caused that anomaly?
Well, if there's something going on that has a magnetic component to it,
okay,
it might be,
yes,
the result of it rather than the cause.
Another major factor, again, which for me just really anchored, your research on this, was what's called the bathtub, the foundation footings, for want of a better term, which were 70 foot tall.
70 foot deep.
Oh, tall, deep, yes.
Right.
And they were, I think they had very, very little damage, if any. I haven't seen any damage on them, but
there was no water leaking through. The bathtub, the towers were built in the Hudson River because
on reclaimed land from the Hudson River.
Right, because bedrock was 70, that's 7 times 10, 70 feet below the water table.
Yeah.
And they built the towers on that bedrock, but that's 70 feet down. So they built this dike around it that they called the bathtub. It's sort of the inverse. It keeps the water out rather than in.
Yeah.
And the tower, the bathtub begins sort of at the old shoreline, out the distance.
Yes.
But 70 feet down. And if that dike had been ruptured, you have all sorts of subways that connect in there, and all of Lower Manhattan would have been flooded.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
And that's a sizable area too.
Yeah.
And also talking about the trains and those underground tunnels, again, I believe there was virtually no damage or minimal damage.
Yeah, there was some here and there, but when they excavated down, there's some pictures of the PATH train terminal.
Yes.
And the PATH trains are the subways that go over to the Jersey side.
Yes.
They were built in 1900 something.
Yeah.
Before 1910.
Yeah.
Maybe they built things better back then.
Yeah.
It could hold up.
Yeah.
And there's pictures of FEMA going down. You know, they put red
Yes.
X's on things, count how many bodies they recovered or injured people, whatnot. They have those red X's on the subway car. Everything's intact.
Yes.
There's water on the platform, but you have fire hoses and you have
Sure. Yeah.
things are open. The earth moving equipment that came in to help clean up the area, and within a day or so they brought in earth moving equipment.
Yeah.
That began to damage the bathtub.
Interesting.
But 2 500,000-ton buildings crashing down didn't.
That was just my next point I was going to ask or make. The fact is, had it been any kind of demolition in the conventional sense, the bathtub would have had to have been affected
As a matter
deeply.
of fact, the remains of Building 6. Building 6 lost the middle approximately 50%.
Yes.
And it was an 8-story building next to Tower 1. The westernmost portion of it, you know, when they're going to take it down, they didn't put bombs in it. They used cables to pull it down because they're afraid of damaging that bathtub wall.
How interesting. And I tell you what's also very interesting, Dr. Wood, is that they brought not only the earth-moving equipment, but they brought loads of earth onto. Now, I know we're perhaps jumping ahead into what was going on and why they would be doing that, but that's just another
There's a whole wide range of things.
bonkers kind of thing.
But
Because it was fuming, wasn't it? After the event,
Right.
whatever this event was, and we'll talk about that in a moment or two, there was this continual fuming that went on for weeks, and all this dirt being shipped in.
What I like to begin is that saying the towers didn't burn up or slam to the ground, but turned into dust in midair.
Yes.
And we know that because not just seeing it, but if they'd slammed to the ground, you'd have this pile of stuff left over.
Sure.
You'd have a broken bathtub.
Yeah.
You'd have a seismic recording of it. Those things didn't happen. So we know it turned to dust in midair. When the dust landed, it's apparent that the dust continued breaking down and then began to rise up. It became finer and finer, and it got to the size of approximately DNA, a hundredth of the size of red blood cells.
Wow. I hadn't
Mask,
realised
we're
that.
going to keep it in.
That
Keep it
is-
out. People inhaled it right into their bloodstreams.
Wow.
All the constituents of the buildings.
Right.
And that includes organic matter.
Right. Well, hold that thought because we're going to come back for
Okay.
the next part. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really fascinating. Look forward to the next part. Join us then. And welcome to part 3 of our talk with Dr. Judy Wood, who's here at Northampton University, and we're taking the opportunity of having a little chat with her about 9/11, those anomalous events and the physics behind it. Dr. Wood, thank you again for joining us.
Well, thank you for caring about this subject.
It's so important. I think one of the most important things is that our perceptions have been changed, our perceptions have been managed, and this is absolutely incredible to me. Now I am kind of hopefully wide awake to that 9/11 event. But I want to, you were telling me that the dust particles went down to the size of DNA, which I hadn't actually realised, which is phenomenal, and people were breathing that in, and we know that there was so much sickness and illness with first responders.
Every constituent of the building was dustified.
Yeah.
I use a unique word because we've never seen this happen before, so we don't have a word for that. The buildings turned to dust.
Yes.
They were dustified. We need a new word for that phenomenon.
Yeah, and there was no pancaking, there was no clear demolition, because otherwise we wouldn't have had the results that we have. And also, not only that, this is maybe a slight sidebar, but it is to do with whatever brought these buildings down or was used, was the fact that the other buildings seemed to be infected with a kind of dissociative, corrosive, inducing...
The process continued.
...problem. So perhaps you could mention that, because I think that is really interesting.
One thing about investigating this, it's so important to stay with what you know that you know.
Yeah.
And what I know is what the evidence shows. And don't go beyond that, and just continue to collect the evidence. Don't make conclusions beyond what the evidence shows.
Sure.
But what the evidence shows is these buildings turned to dust, and the dust continued breaking down. And buildings nearby, a couple of them, had this problem where, like Bankers Trust, had that gash in the front. They repaired the gash, and then they took some dust studies and decided they needed to dismantle the building.
The entire building?
Just after they repaired it.
Yeah.
It took about 10 years.
So, and that, whatever dissociation or whatever corrosion was going on was fast acting, as I understand it, as well.
It was something that didn't seem to be stopping.
Yeah, yeah.
And they, had a difficulty with that. Also, there's other weird qualities of this event. We've kind of covered the bare bones of it.
Yeah.
But looking at the dust itself and also different measurements that were taken there, there's a nuclear reaction of some sort going on. Not normal nukes. There was no Geiger counter going off the chart.
Right.
Alerts. People around the world would have measured that.
Yes.
But there was tritium.
Right. Tell us about tritium.
Tritium is an isotope of hydrogen, and it's only found in nuclear processes.
Oh, right.
And so there's some nuclear process going on there. It's very similar to what was termed cold fusion.
Oh, yes.
Which is a type of free energy.
Yes, yes, indeed.
But it shows that something strange is going on. Also transmutation, elements changing, materials changing into other materials. Yeah. And some of these effects have been reproduced in labs. Again, I don't know exactly what gizmo did this, but we can reproduce it. Reproduce all of the effects. And notice the physics involved in that, but it was something we've never seen before.
Right. And the other great anomaly too, well, there's many anomalies, but there was a great lack of porcelainware, white goods, like wash basins, toilets. Where were they?
There should have been about 3,000 toilets there, and they're easy to spot.
There were none,
ceramic thing. Not even one found. Not even a piece of one.
And there was a huge marble facade as well.
The marble facade on the WFC, the World Financial Center buildings, there's 3 of them across the street. Yeah. All of the marble facades went away.